I'm really excited today because I was really honored when Justin and Brandon and George reached out to me to do this Creative Mornings talk. And they gave me a list of words and were like, which one speaks to you? And of course, there was a few that was like, yeah, I could definitely talk on that. But I always like to give myself a little bit of a challenge. And I chose the word procrastination just because I felt like it was one of those words personally that has a lot of weight to it. And I know I named this talk Welcome to Procrastination 101, but that is not what I'm going to be doing here. I'm actually going to be trying to break down and maybe think creatively how we can reframe how we approach that word and what that word means. And so I do want to take a little bit of a poll. I don't know if y'all can see me or if I can really see you, but even just thinking to yourself really quickly, raise your hand if you've ever been called a procrastinator. I know that I have. I've literally could raise both my hands and my feet. Do you know how old you were the first time you were called a procrastinator? You can throw it in the chat too. I would love to see. And what kind of emotions, like what's the energy, the vibe that you feel with that word? Yeah, negative, we child, deep shame, vulnerability. Yep. Seems similar, huh? It seems like we all have very similar energies around what this word might mean, right? So I want to talk a little bit about my first experience, the first time I was told I was a procrastinator. I think I was in second or third grade, and I was actually in art class. I remember we had a self-portrait due, and I didn't get it done in time. And I remember going to my teacher and explaining to her why I hadn't gotten done. And her response was, well, there's no excuses, just get the work done. Don't be a procrastinator. And I remember having that emotion sink into my body thinking, well, it's not that I didn't try, and it's not that I didn't want to do it. I didn't even know what a process was. I didn't know what a creative process was, but I couldn't tell her or express or advocate for myself enough to be like, hey, I just needed a little bit more time to figure out what my self-portrait was going to look like. It wasn't just going to simply be me just drawing my eyes and my lips. I wanted to really, truly embody who I was. And that was the first time that I realized that maybe my brain might be wired just a little bit differently, a little bit similar to how all of our brains are wired in this chat right now too. And so the more that I thought about this story, the more that I started to think about my experience and my emotions, and even just the past year that we've been through and the past couple of years that I've been through personally, the more I started to realize how much this word has popped up here and there in my life, whether it was directly or in passing or seeing how people are breaking down so many other words. I was like, well, maybe we can dig into this a little bit. I think what I wanted my teacher to say to me was, well, what's going on in your process? How can I support you in your process, you know? At the time, like I said, I was in second and third grade, so all I heard was failure, and that immediately built a deep sense of failing. And so from that moment on, everything that I was doing was focused on producing and the produced opposed to the process. And it wasn't until I was a young adult that I started to have a better understanding of what that looked like. And even to be completely honest, that I even knew that I was a creative. Like, I feel like I just found out that I was creative a couple of years ago because I started to understand my own process. And sometimes my process takes some time and it takes some intention so that I can produce something that I'm proud of and that I'm proud to share with the world. And so really, in reality, when it comes down to it, I hope my art teacher's doing well, and I'm sure she meant well what she was doing. And it was school, and school was about producing, right? But when we're talking about creativity and expressing ourselves, I want to reframe how we approach procrastination. And so I really have been thinking about the ways that I break it down in my head of what this word is trying to say by not saying it at all. And so for me, procrastination has been a huge part of rest. Sometimes I just need to rest. Sometimes my part of my process is just simply letting the thoughts simmer in my head into a point that I can come to a conclusion of like, this is what I want to do. This feels good energetically in my heart and my spirit and my brain and my mind. And I think for so long we've operated in a world that's been so focused on the production side of things. I mean, we live in a capitalist world, so it makes a lot of sense. But I want to try to reframe that the same that we reframed everything else in the past year. And I really feel like at first I was worried about trying to talk about procrastination in this way, to be completely honest with all of y'all, because I was so worried that people were going to be latched on to holding on to an idea or word just because it's always existed. What we've seen in the past year, that things that have been standard are no longer deemed as okay, and that basic human rights are no longer an option or up for question. But it seems like a fear of failure affects your self-worth. So that doesn't seem like that's a part of uplifting people and their basic human rights and taking care of their bodies and their minds. And so I want to talk more how we can radically look at like how rest is revolutionary. And that was something that I had just heard from my dear friend Spike this past summer. Spike is like always checking in on me. Like, are you resting? Are you taking care of your body? Have you moved your body? Have you drank water? And I was like, wow, that is a humongous part of this process of just doing anything in general. Getting out of bed and doing anything is making sure that you have the time and the rest. I was actually talking to my creative partner behind Different World, Nettie, last night. We were working on this and running through it, and I was super nervous because I was like, Brandy had sent me the link to see how many people were going to be on this call, and I was like, 127. I haven't talked to 127 people, and like, and I don't even know how long. I think maybe a high school assembly. I was all nervous, and I still am a little bit nervous now. But I said to Nettie, I was like, even anxious running it through with her last night. And I was like, if I just get some sleep, I know tomorrow I'm just going to get on there and I'm going to be able to settle into my body and I'm going to keep it flowing. And even in that words, it was like, rest is so important. It's such an important part of reframing what we think is procrastination. I think that since I started Different World in the past 4 years, I realized how important that I had been operating so much out of survival and, like I said, a fear of failure, that a lot of my decisions were based off of that, opposed to what was genuinely making me happy or was genuinely making me feel like I was making a positive impact on the world. And I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but sometimes when you wake up and you're just like kind of in a bad mood and you just never check your energy. So everything that you're seeing and doing, the person in front of you at line, you're like, just figure out your drink, just figure it out. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And it made me really think about how we can start to check in with our bodies and check in with each other to make sure that we're really making sure that we're aware of how these words and how we speak to each other affects how we move in the world. So much of the creative process is dreaming, and there's also analyzing. And I heard something in the past week or the past couple months that dreaming and analyzing can't be done at the same time. They're actually two different processes. And so many times that we've gotten to how fast the world is going and how fast the internet is growing and technology and the creative worlds and the industries are growing and shifting and changing, that sometimes you smash those two processes together. But it's super important to give yourself that time to dream so that when it's time to analyze and execute, you're ready to do it. And it's a thing that I've coined in the past year that's like really stuck with me and helped me understand, like almost honestly healing those wounds of being told I was a procrastinator as a child, was measure twice, cut once. And I was thinking about it and I was like, it's crazy to me because I remember being told I was a procrastinator as a child in school. And then my teacher in the next sentence would say something like, well, Rome was never built in a day. And I'm like, well, how come Rome got the time to be built, but I don't have the time to do what I need to do, right? And so it was this parallel that I was trying to figure out, what's the difference between us and Rome, right? What's the difference between honoring ourselves like this great thing that people, use as a simple statement, and also honoring ourselves and our space and our time and our energy. And obviously, if you know me, I do believe in the power of getting shit done. Of course, there's a time and place for everything, but I do want to always honor that there's a process to everything as well. And so for me, there's so much, I know that a lot of people can relate to this, that if you have any kind of creative bone in your body, your brain's almost always going. And if we only, we live in a world sometimes where our worth is only equal to our labor. And I want to make sure that if anything you walk away from this is that you remember that that's literally not the truth of the matter. We've completely exited out of emotional labor, spiritual labor, energetic labor, all these things that go into the physical labor of producing a product. And so for me, that has been a huge thing of honoring myself when I'm thinking about my process and how I get to where from point A to point B and how I get some stuff done, right? And it was like, this is one of those things where if I don't honor myself, everything that I put out is going to seem like everything that I feel. And if I put out everything based off of how I feel, I think that I wouldn't be talking to you guys right now. I'd probably be a little bit more of a hermit and maybe a little bit more bitter. So it's important that we keep ourselves grounded in that way so that we can be producing things that are making a positive impact on our communities. And if anything that we've learned in the past year, obviously these things can be reframed and reshaped. There's no reason that we have to continue to doing things a certain way just because they've been that way. In fact, it's almost like one of those things where the only constant in life is change, so we have to be doing and moving accordingly. I think that when you're around the people who get this, which it seems like there's a lot of new faces, and I see some people that I know, it's a little easier to have an understanding of this. But like I said, in the past year, I think George made a little bit of a joke earlier when we all got on the Zoom and was like, we all know where the mute button is right now. Like, we all know where the chat is now. We've been doing Zoom calls and Google chat calls for like a year and a half and probably will continue to. And it was one of those things where I saw the world shift in grace and mercy for each other. All of a sudden, where's my email became, I understand, take your time, rest, get what you need to get done. We shifted and changed how we spoke to each other and operated with each other so drastically based off of us having a universal experience. And to me, it made sense. Like, I kept on hearing people say, when we go back to normal, and I was like, well, there's a lot of the things that we're doing and moving and operating into that I think we need to literally keep a hold of and continue to explore radically how we can change how we interact with each other as people, but also as creatives. My biggest thing is my people, and I know, like I said, I see a lot of my people, and I know a lot of you will become my people because we are in direct community. I do think situations and spaces like this are the reasons why we can have these conversations that are going to be pushing the envelope and helping us develop our sense of self, And so I always say this, if you know me, you've heard me say it a zillion times, it's never a lack of creativity, it's always a lack of resources and community. And I think that's a huge part of us looking at how we can reframe this word. Maybe instead of, why isn't it on my front desk, why is it on my desk on Monday? How can I help you in your process? What are the delays? Is there any way that I can support you? Reframing how we speak to each other in those ways, I think, will also just show us how to radically love each other differently. And I think that if anything, that's been a huge process for me this past year of understanding how I see human beings, how I interact with them, and how I want to interact with other people. And so, all that being said, I just feel like, once again, I will say this again, labor does not equal your self-worth. So if procrastination is a part of, to me, when I hear the word procrastination, I think of lazy, I think of labor, I think of on time or late, I guess. And so I'm thinking about breaking down each of those things and how can we support each other as a creative community to make sure that we're getting things done. I think that we live in a world that makes you feel very isolated sometimes, and it can make you feel like you're ostracized from away from people if you're not operating in a certain way. But that is exactly why we're creatives. That's exactly why we were put on this earth, is to do what we're doing, is to be not like everybody else and continue to push things forward. Black Mountain College wouldn't have happened if they just would have done everything that was being told. I wonder how many of those artists were told they were procrastinators. And it makes me think about all these movements and things that I've in my head have been so important to me developing myself as an artist. And I'm like, all these movements, all these things that have like been these like pockets of DIY spaces came out of people coming together and figuring out how can we get this shit done. And I think that if we can move in ways of like making sure that's a part of our day to day, then maybe we can start to trickle it out inside of the world. I do believe, and maybe I am biased, that creatives are literally the mouthpiece of our generations and will always be. We are able to translate our worlds and talk about things that people might not be able to understand just by a couple words, but do it in so many different shapes and forms. And in order to do that, we have to do it with intention, and that takes time. And so I was actually talking to Nettie again, I'm bringing her up again, but we talk a lot about our parallel experiences. Nettie got the opportunity to go to NC State School of Design, which is an incredible school. And I'm a very much a self-taught artist. Honestly, like I said before, I didn't even know I was an artist until a couple of years ago. And so we talk about these parallels because we're so like-minded, right? We're like very similar, like-minded, but in my eyes growing up, I thought that I would never be able to do these things because I didn't make these achievements or graduate from college or do so and so. And now I'm looking at the situation where I'm creating literally the world that I dream of. Every single night I dream of this world that is making these spaces more and more possible so that we can have these conversations and push things and not just be okay with just what it is. We were talking a lot about her process when she was in school and how some of her teachers would say, as soon as you get the assignment, look at it, because your brain is going to be thinking about it even when you're not thinking about it. And I think that was so important to me understanding how I was trying to talk about procrastination. It's not so much lateness or tardiness or laziness. It's an opportunity to give yourself the time to produce something that you feel good and proud about and that you feel had good intentions behind it. If you know anything about Different World 2, that's literally our whole motto: do nothing without intention. Sometimes some of our decisions take longer than I would like, but I know that when we do something, we do it with intention. And like I said, measure twice, cut once. If I'm gonna be in a world where I'm having to produce these things and keep things going, I might as well try to do it with intention, right? And so I'm really out here just figuring this shit out the same way that anybody else is. And so it's really funny just even being in this position and talking to y'all about this, because it was really my first time exploring and digging into the healing of figuring out what this word means and how I want to reframe it, and talking about the things that I think are more important, which is rest is revolutionary. Your labor does not equal your worth. Your productivity does not equal your value, and to do nothing without intention. And those are the core things that I walked away from looking at that word and saying, you know what? I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with being defined within this box of saying that this is what I equal to. I want to equal to this. And I think this will help me understand how I can teach other people and show other people, hey, listen, you know what? Sometimes it doesn't get done the way that we want it to get done, but we'll always get it done. And if I can support you in any way possible, please let me know. I think that we've reframed how we look at support. Support's not always just what you think somebody might need. It's asking them what they need and truly meeting people where they are. And so I could rant and rave about a lot of different things on all these different topics, but I don't want to keep everyone for too long. I just want to make sure that people remember those core things that I was speaking about, and just make sure that you give yourself the time to give yourself the process that you deserve. I really feel like we need to make sure that, I don't know, it's really important that we make accessible and inclusive spaces, and that word feels very isolating. And I want to make sure that whenever we're all moving forward together as a community, that we're continuing this conversation. I would be ashamed if, and I hope you don't, please don't actually take everything I say for, just go out there and repeat it. No, think about it yourself and come back to me. We can continue the conversation about how we can reframe these words. And it's exciting. It's an exciting state to be in, to be like, we have the space, time, energy, and the right community to be able to take these words and say, you know what, that's not it. Let's do something different. And sorry, my brain just went out for a second. The best thing you can do is, whenever you're like having these moments of doubt or digging into these words and things that you heard, is really just take the time to, I don't know, dig a little bit deeper. I think I said it to George and Justin and Brandon when we were talking about it, was I picked this word because of how much it irritated me. And I've started to realize that things that bother me the most are the things that I should dig into the most. And so it's just been a really cool process just doing this in general, whether it was for this talk or just in general. So I'm really thankful for it. And I really do believe that a different world is possible. So I want to encourage everyone just to keep in mind that your productivity is not your worth, or your labor is not your worth, your productivity is not your value, and to do nothing without intention. So.
Fantastic. That was awesome. Give Honey a round of applause, a twinkle, jazz hands. I don't know, whatever. It was awesome. And if in the meantime, I hope people were dropping questions in the chat. Lex, do we have any?
There weren't any questions. There was just a lot of like agreeing and repeating things that Honey was saying, which was really sweet. A lot of people latched onto when he said intention takes time.
Right.
And I thought that was like a really special quote to hang on to, especially given the theme of procrastination. And I think it's going to be my mantra for the day.
Right.
I actually just wanted to, I always feel like, whenever and like I said too, this could go down so many rabbit holes, but when you look at just how our country was built, clearly there was no intention in it. That's why as artists, it's like our responsibility to like make sure that we're reframing those things. But that is something that changed my life. I literally have it tattooed on my body. So I hope that it does do the same thing that it did for me, truly.
Absolutely. And there are some questions now.
And feel free to email them whenever you want, considering the theme.
Right. Yeah, you can hang on to your questions, sit with them.
We'll forward them on.
Yeah. People want to know, well, first of all, people want to know what's next for Different World and what's going on with Different World, but also how they can support you.
Well, I think we're doing it right now. I feel very supported. Like I said, I was super, super nervous. I'm usually like the chatty Miss Chat, but I feel very supported in just being able to have the space to be able to talk about these things. So I think this is a great start. But if you'd like to support Different World, um, we are still in developing phases. We are probably going to open sometime late this summer, which we're super, super excited about. We just started building, which I never in my life could honestly, I could cry right now. I never in my life thought that something like this would be a possibility for myself. So it's just been such an incredible process, and to see the community, it felt like we just built the frame of the house and y'all are doing the decorating. And so if you always want to bring your ideas and, you know, anything that you want to collaborate with, that's always helpful. We are completely, as of right now, completely funded by the community, which is insane. I had no idea that the community was going to respond the way that they did. So if you want to support us, the best way that you can do that right now is giving a one-time donation, which you can find on our website, or becoming a supporting partner. And pretty much what that means is that we have people who have committed to at least $25 a month to making sure that we can keep our space accessible and our equipment at checkout free if needed be. So if somebody like me 4 years ago when I was homeless strolled into Different World and said, hey, I'm interested in becoming a DJ, can I borrow this computer in this space? We could say, hey, yeah, totally. You know what? Someone in our community has already paid it forward to make sure that this computer is free and accessible for you. So, and that goes into other things too as well. But that's the best way you can support us. And obviously, you know, I love community and talking to people and just brainstorming ideas, and that's something that fuels me personally. And I've never had the opportunity to be in community with people like you, so it's just really been amazing.